Harley's biggest betrayal isn't written in a headline. It's hiding inside your engine. Documents leaked from Milwaukee show executives approved a known defect in the twin-cam design to save just $23 per bike. They knew the tensioners would grind down, cutting oil flow until the engine failed. If your Harley rattles at idle, this could explain why. This isn't rumor, it's recorded. And by the end, you'll see the proof they buried, the lawsuits they dodged, and the upgrades riders built to survive what Harley refused to fix. They knew it would fail. It started with a leak, the kind that rattled through garages and message boards faster than any exhaust note ever could. Documents surfaced showing that Harley-Davidson, the company riders had trusted for generations, had made a decision that still stings like a burn. In those pages, engineers laid out options to fix a flaw in the new twin-cam motor. Stronger materials, better oiling, redesigned tensioners, all of them worked. But management circled the cheapest one, the weakest one, the one that saved exactly $23 per motorcycle. $23. That was the price they put on your safety, on your pride, on every mile you thought was protected by American steel. For decades, riders believed Harley was different. It was never about perfection. It was about trust. You could forgive oil drips and rattles because they were part of the legend. But what no one expected was betrayal engineered from the top down. The failure points weren't bad luck. They were built into the design. The suits in Milwaukee gambled that riders would keep buying, keep fixing, keep believing. They were right for a while. We loved the badge too much to imagine it would lie to us. But that trust, once welded in chrome, has started to crack. You can hear it in the way riders talk now. Half pride, half bitterness. We weren't supposed to find out. They thought the paper trail would stay buried. But the leak changed everything. It proved what thousands of riders already felt in their bones. Our loyalty had been turned into a business model. Harley didn't just build engines, they built denial. But this wasn't the first time Harley looked the other way. The signs were there from the start. The recall that tried to hide a revolution. Back in 1999, just months after the first twin cam hit the streets, a small recall slipped quietly through official channels. It was called Campaign 095. Most riders never even heard about it. The notice said something about a cam sprocket bolt that might loosen under certain conditions. Dealers fixed it fast and moved on. To the public, it was nothing, a minor adjustment on a new engine line. But inside the walls of Harley's engineering division, it was more than a fix. It was a flare gun in the dark. That bolt was never the real problem. It was the symptom of deeper stress running through the engine's new architecture. Whispered memos spoke of bearings showing premature wear and camshafts flexing under heat. Mechanics noticed early failures, unexplained noises, and metal shavings during oil changes. Yet the official message was calm and polished. Everything was under control, business as usual. Riders, proud of their brand, trusted that message. After all, Harley wouldn't let something unsafe roll out the door, at least that's what we thought. Looking back, it's clear the recall wasn't a hiccup, it was a warning. The company had glimpsed the first crack in the foundation of its next-generation engine and decided to keep building anyway. That choice would define an entire era of heartbreak. It was the moment the legend started to rust from the inside out. And when that rattle started showing up in driveways, the truth finally made noise. If you've ever owned a Harley, or even dreamed of one, you need to be part of this conversation. Hit like if you felt that same frustration, and drop a comment with your story. The death rattle. If you've ever owned a twin cam, you know that sound. It starts as a soft clicking at idle, barely noticeable under the rumble. Then it becomes a rattle, metallic, hollow, unnerving. They told us it was character, just the sound of a Harley doing what Harleys do, but we learned better. That noise was the beginning of failure, the whisper before the scream. Inside the cam chest, plastic tensioner shoes were grinding themselves into dust. As they wore down, bits of debris flowed through the oil system, cutting the engine from within like sandpaper on steel. One rider described it best. My Dyna purred like a dream until the day it didn't. 1 second it was alive, the next it locked up doing 70 on the highway. He was lucky to walk away. Many weren't. Leaked testing data later showed engineers knew these parts would fail long before the average rider hit 50,000 miles. They calculated wear rates, projected breakdowns, and filed it away. For them, it was a number. For us, it was a matter of flesh and bone. The sound of that rattle is still burned into our memories. It wasn't just the noise of an engine dying, it was the sound of a promise breaking. Harley didn't design an accident. They designed a countdown. And the worst part? They called it progress. So when they promised a stronger engine, we thought they'd finally listened. We were wrong. If you ride, ride smart. My trusted gear and accessories are in the description. Back to it. Same mistake, new paint. 2007 arrived with big headlines. Harley unveiled the Twin Cam 96, boasting smoother power, stronger torque, and better reliability. Riders wanted to believe. We lined up, we bought in, and we told ourselves this was the evolution that would put the past behind us. But as the miles rolled on, the same ghosts came back. Different year, same bones. The new hydraulic tensioners were supposed to cure the old disease. Instead, they only slowed it down. The same oiling paths, the same flawed geometry, just hidden under new covers. Owners began reporting faint rattles again. Some engines ran fine, others seized without warning. When the failures returned, Harley's message was predictable. Isolated incidents, nothing systemic. But in garages across the country, mechanics could see it plainly. The architecture was fighting itself. It didn't matter how much chrome you polished, the heart of the machine was still bleeding. What was sold as evolution was really repetition with better marketing. Riders started swapping stories, comparing noises, and realizing we'd been sold the same engine with a fresh coat of hope. Harley had called it evolution. We called it deja vu. The betrayal no longer shocked us. It hardened us. That's when loyalty began to fracture. Not because we stopped loving the brand, but because the brand stopped loving us back. And the deeper we looked, the uglier it got. Because Harley didn't just ignore riders, they punished them. The Dyna files. The truth came out like oil leaking from a cracked case, slow at first, then impossible to ignore. Inside the so-called Dyna files, leaked internal reports showed Harley had known about the critical design flaws in the twin cam engine for years. Engineers had logged failures specific to the Dyna lineup, noting increased vibration, oil starvation, and cam-bearing wear long before the public ever heard the words tensioner failure. Yet instead of halting production or warning riders, the company calculated the cost of silence. They saw the graphs, the field reports, and the test failures, and they made the call anyway. Every number on those pages represented a risk, our risk. When you ride, you accept danger. You don't expect betrayal. Harley knew that. They understood the trust riders placed in that bar and shield logo, and they leveraged it. By keeping the problems buried, they gambled that most riders would never see the evidence. Those who did experience failures were told it was their own maintenance habits or bad luck. But buried deep in those internal memos was the smoking gun. Executives had signed off on continuing production despite knowing the likelihood of catastrophic breakdowns. For decades, we thought we were keeping Harley alive through loyalty. Now we know Harley was keeping its numbers alive through denial. Every Dyna that shook apart on the highway was part of a spreadsheet. Every near accident a line item in a cost-benefit analysis. This wasn't mismanagement. It was betrayal measured in percentages. And when those engines failed, Harley had one more betrayal ready. They turned the warranty against us. How they blamed the rider. It started small. A claim denied here, a delay there. But soon riders across the country began noticing a pattern. No matter how carefully they maintained their bikes, no matter how spotless their service records, Harley was finding new reasons to say no. If a motor seized, it was blamed on aggressive riding. If a bearing failed, they said it was improper maintenance. Even stock machines, bone standard right from the showroom, were branded as modified if the owner had swapped out a muffler or air cleaner. The warranty wasn't protection anymore. It was a weapon pointed at the people who paid for it. One rider from Ohio told his story on a forum. His Dyna quit on a long trip, cam tensioner worn to dust at 35,000 miles. The dealer took one look, shook his head, and said the claim was void because of performance use. The man had never raced a day in his life. Another rider in Texas waited months while his bike sat disassembled, paperwork under review. When the denial came, it blamed him for failure to provide documentation. They didn't even mention the tensioner that had exploded inside the case. Harley's strategy was clear: stall, deny, and exhaust the customer until they gave up. These weren't isolated stories. Leaked training slides later showed dealers were instructed to cut warranty payouts by nearly half. Every denial saved corporate money, and every stranded rider paid the difference. They taught their employees to turn customer loyalty into corporate cover. The brand that once promised freedom was now lecturing riders about responsibility, as if we were the problem for trusting them too much. But inside the factory, not everyone stayed silent. The engineers who fought back. Not every Harley employee went along with the deception. Deep inside the development labs, some engineers refused to look the other way. They were riders too, men and women who had grease under their nails and pride in their craft. When the failures began piling up, they raised alarms. Test riders logged repeated breakdowns during standard endurance runs. Lab technicians documented oil pressure drops, cracked compensators, and early cam bearing wear. Reports were written, fixes proposed, solutions tested, and ignored. Management buried their findings under cost adjustment memos. One name that surfaced in the leaks was a veteran test rider who had spent decades evaluating new engines. He logged failure after failure, predicting exactly how the twin-cam tensioner would collapse in real-world conditions. Instead of being rewarded for his honesty, he was pushed out for insubordination. Other engineers described the same treatment: demotions, isolation, quiet firings. Those who stayed learned to speak carefully, to protect their jobs, but some couldn't stomach it. They left and joined independent shops, bringing their knowledge to the people Harley had betrayed. These were the real rebels, the ones who put integrity before paycheck. They saw the soul of the company slipping away and tried to hold the line. Their internal rebellion wasn't loud, but it was righteous. They believed Harley's heritage meant something deeper than margins. When the memos leaked years later, riders finally learned the truth. Our strongest defenders were never the marketers or the executives. They were the workers who refused to lie. And the moment their warnings leaked outside, the courtroom doors opened. When the courts finally rode in, for years, Harley brushed off complaints as internet noise. But when the lawsuits started stacking up, they couldn't ignore them anymore. The first major case came from a group of owners who had experienced catastrophic failures just outside warranty coverage. During discovery, their lawyers uncovered the same internal reports the engineers had tried to surface years earlier. Those documents showed Harley had full knowledge of the failure rates, down to projected mileage intervals. The courtroom became the only place where the truth finally had an engine of its own. One of the most damning moments came when a former quality control manager testified that early redesign options were rejected purely on cost. His words hit harder than any press release. "We could have fixed it. They didn't want to pay for it." That line spread through the riding community like wildfire. More cases followed. Class actions, regional suits, even independent filings from small dealerships who felt abandoned. Some riders received settlements, others only apologies. But the damage was already done. Trust, once shattered, doesn't rebuild on legal paper. The verdicts weren't about money, they were about accountability. Riders wanted someone to finally admit what we already knew, that the machines we loved were deliberately compromised. The courts forced Harley to face its own shadow, dragging the truth into daylight. But justice came too late for many who had already paid the price in wrecked engines and empty wallets. But the real fix didn't come from Harley. It came from the garages of people like you. We fixed what they wouldn't. When Harley turned its back on riders, the community didn't collapse. It adapted. In garages, sheds, and small-town workshops across America, riders stopped waiting for corporate help and started building their own solutions. Companies like S&S, Cycle, Fueling, and Andrews Products rose from the noise like mechanical prophets. They didn't spend money on glossy ads or heritage slogans. They earned trust one fix at a time. They listened to riders, studied the failures Harley ignored, and engineered real answers to the problems that destroyed engines and wallets. S&S tensioner conversions, Fueling high-volume oil pumps, and Andrews hardened cam components became symbols of defiance. Riders who once swore by factory parts now swore by aftermarket ingenuity. Every upgrade was an act of rebellion, a declaration that loyalty to truth mattered more than loyalty to branding. Forums filled with photos of rebuilds, step-by-step guides, and proud declarations of never again. The same machines that betrayed their owners were now being reborn stronger than ever, not because Harley cared, but because riders refused to give up. What began as anger turned into empowerment. The aftermarket community didn't just repair broken engines, it restored faith in craftsmanship. Each successful fix was proof that real engineering still lived outside the boardroom. Riders stopped being customers and became collaborators in a movement that Harley could neither control nor suppress. The cracks in corporate trust became the foundation of a new kind of brotherhood, one that built itself from the ashes of disappointment. But Harley's own dealers were about to feel the backlash firsthand. Dealers under fire. For years, Harley dealerships had been the temples of the brand, places where riders gathered, traded stories, and trusted the staff like family. But when the truth about the twin-cam failures spread, those same walls became battlegrounds. Riders stormed in demanding answers, only to be met with polite denial or empty promises. Service managers were caught between corporate instructions and the customers who once shook their hands in friendship. Every broken motor that came through the door carried more than noise. It carried anger, suspicion, and heartbreak. Some dealers stayed loyal to the company line, repeating the same phrases sent from Milwaukee. No systemic issues, improper maintenance, not covered. But others saw through it. Quietly, they began helping riders off the record, sourcing aftermarket parts, or recommending local independent mechanics who could actually fix what Harley refused to admit was broken. These small acts of rebellion came with risk, but they kept the bond alive between honest workers and betrayed owners. The real conflict wasn't just between riders and the company, it was between truth and survival inside the dealer network itself. The consequences were brutal. Dealerships saw their service revenue collapse as customers turned elsewhere. Accessory sales dropped and trade-ins sat unsold. Even loyal salespeople started to question what they were defending. The same community that had once fueled their success now viewed them as the front line of corporate deception. The people who sold freedom were being crushed by the very system they served. And soon, the entire brand would pay the price of distrust. A Harley was once more than a motorcycle. It was a badge of belonging, a living piece of pride. But as the stories of engine failures, denials, and betrayals piled up, that pride began to corrode. Riders who once stood tall at bike nights now found themselves explaining why their machines rattled, leaked, or refused to start. Online listings for early twin-cam models plummeted. What had been a symbol of status now carried a scarlet letter: beware the death rattle. Buyers backed away, and resale values sank like anchors. The loss wasn't just financial, it was personal. Riders who sacrificed years for their dream bikes watched them fail, turning pride into humiliation. Even collectors saw value vanish as trust collapsed. The rumble once symbolized freedom. Now it echoed betrayal. Harley's loyal followers were left asking the question no brand survives. Was loyalty ever worth the cost? But instead of giving up, the community built something even stronger. If you believe riders deserve the truth, not marketing spin, hit subscribe right now. We're exposing what really happens behind the chrome, one story at a time. Don't just ride the legend, protect it. Because every view, every click, every new voice makes this movement impossible to ignore. The riders' quiet revolt. What followed wasn't a protest. It was a resurrection. Across the country, riders began organizing not around brands, but around each other. Forums turned into lifelines. YouTube channels became classrooms, and social media groups evolved into support networks. Instead of waiting for Harley to act, riders took matters into their own hands. They shared repair techniques, bulk ordered aftermarket parts, and built local alliances with independent shops. The same machines that once divided them now united them under a new banner: self-reliance. From the grassroots revolt rose a new pride. The death rattle became a badge of survival, proof riders endured what Harley ignored. Loyalty shifted from dealerships to garages, where unity replaced betrayal. Out of failure came strength, and the community reclaimed its legacy, built not by corporate hands, but by riders who refused to surrender. And when Harley's story hit the headlines again, the world finally saw what loyalty really looks like. Heritage versus the spreadsheet. Harley-Davidson once stood for something sacred: freedom, rebellion, and pride stitched into every mile of open road. But somewhere along the way, that spirit was traded for quarterly earnings and shareholder smiles. The people at the top began treating heritage like a marketing tool instead of a responsibility. They wrapped greed in the language of patriotism, selling American-made pride while quietly outsourcing loyalty to accountants and cost analysts. The chrome stayed shiny, but behind it, the math grew cold. Every decision became a formula: fix or deny, redesign or deflect, protect riders or protect revenue. The spreadsheet always won. Those glossy 2000s ads preached rebellion, but rebellion can't be financed. Harley sold freedom like merchandise, turning grit into marketing and loyalty into margin. The betrayal wasn't mechanical, it was moral. They sold identity, then hollowed it out. The real Harley was never corporate. It lived in the hands, hearts, and roads of the riders who built it. But the people building those bikes had their own breaking point. Workers draw the line. Inside the factories, the truth hit just as hard as it did on the highways. The workers who assembled those engines carried the same pride we did. For them, each bolt tightened was a personal signature, a mark of craftsmanship passed from one generation to the next. But as the scandals deepened, that pride began to fracture. Whispers of shortcuts, pressure to meet impossible quotas, and management ignoring defect reports poisoned morale. The people on the line could see the cracks forming before anyone else. They weren't just building machines, they were being asked to build lies. Veteran machinists felt torn between loyalty and conscience, watching leadership ignore flaws they wanted to fix. Skilled workers left for shops that still valued integrity, while those who stayed bore silent guilt. The pride that once defined Harley's factories was replaced by fear, fatigue, and heartbreak, the spirit of craftsmanship buried beneath corporate indifference and broken trust. And while Harley stumbled, the rest of the world took notes. Our road forward. We can't change what they did, but we can decide what we do next. The Harley story isn't just corporate, it's human. It's about what happens when loyalty outlives the thing it was given to. The road forward starts with taking back control. Inspect your machine, know its weak points, and never rely on corporate promises to protect you. Upgrade what they refuse to fix, document what they tried to hide, and share your knowledge with the next rider who might still believe the marketing more than the metal. Every act of awareness is an act of resistance. But this isn't about hate, it's about accountability. Real riders don't burn bridges, they rebuild them stronger. That means supporting honest mechanics, small shops, and independent engineers who put safety and craftsmanship before sales goals. It means standing together when corporations forget that freedom isn't a slogan, it's a standard. The same loyalty they exploited can now become the force that rebuilds something better. We don't have to destroy the brand to reclaim its soul. We just have to stop letting them own it. The open road still belongs to us. The brotherhood, the pride, the sound of engines echoing through small towns at dusk. Those were never theirs to sell. They were ours to live. The future of Harley or any brand depends on riders who remember that trust must be earned every mile. The next chapter of motorcycling will not be written by executives. It will be written by riders who demand better. The $23 fix might have broken the brand, but it couldn't break the riders. If your Harley still runs, make sure it runs with truth, not corporate silence. Share your story in the comments, and let's make sure no rider ever faces this betrayal alone again. Subscribe if you believe pride and craftsmanship still matter more than marketing, because we're not just keeping these engines alive, we're rebuilding the soul of what riding used to mean.